Frieza sits on a throne of planets. Empires bend for him. Fleets assemble at his whisper. He can vaporize a world for sport and rebuild a loyal armada with the spare minutes left over. And yet, look closely, his victory is brittle. The laugh is thin. The appetite is endless. Why does ultimate power never feel like enough? You could call Frieza a villain and be partly right. But there's a different truth under the textured artifice of horns and imperial robes. Frieza is a portrait of attachment. He doesn't crave dominance because he enjoys it. He craves it because it means nothing. Power, for him, is a bomb that refuses to stick. He seizes, therefore he must seize again. Freud gives us one way to name this: the death drive, thanatos, the compulsion that leads organisms toward repetition, aggression, and, paradoxically, self-destruction. Freud noticed that we often repeat the very acts that harm us, not out of rational choice, but out of a deeper, unconscious pull. Frieza's cruelty reads like that compulsion. He destroys not simply to dominate others, but to act out an internal storm that never quiets. Each massacre is both a message and a cover, an enactment of emptiness. From the East, Buddhism offers a complementary diagnosis: tanha, craving. Craving shapes the cycle of samsara, the endless recurring of suffering. Attachment fuels rebirth. Clinging perpetuates the loop. Frieza is almost literally samsara-made person. Death and rebirth, a new body, the same hunger. Each resurrection is a failure to relinquish the thing that caused his torment, his own desire for control. So here's the setup. Frieza never wanted freedom. He wanted control, and that's why he'll never be free. This video isn't an anatomy of spectacle. It's an attempt to read a pattern, the way domination becomes a substitute for wholeness, how victory can hollow you rather than heal you. We'll watch the cruelty on Namek, not as spectacle, but as symptom. We'll see his resurrections, not as surprises, but as repetitions. And we'll try to answer the uncomfortable question this cartoon tyrant forces us to ask: when power is the fix, what do you do with the emptiness that remains? Frieza's story is not only about cosmic threat, it is a parable about what happens when you try to own the world to cover a wound. Power without selfhood is a mirror that cracks under the weight of its own reflection. That crack is Frieza's kingdom. On Namek, Frieza strolls through devastation like a man at a gallery opening. He admires his own effects. Planets fall into ash. He smirks. The work is done. He has a throne and a laugh, but every blow he lands is also a question tossed into a void. Is this enough? The answer, always, is no. The want returns like tide. Freud's death drive helps us see what the want hides: repetition, compulsion. It's not that Frieza enjoys cruelty because he's efficient at it. He repeats cruelty because he is bound to repeat, to act out a compulsion that seeks an end it cannot find. The more he obliterates, the more the internal voice urges him on. Destruction becomes an activity that feels alive, but alive for whom? Not for the self he never built. This is the structure of emptiness. You fill, the fill leaks, you fill again. The emperor collects planets like toys. He amasses legions as if friends. He engineers immortality as if permanence could finally seal whatever's leaking inside. The Dragon Balls on Namek are not just a plot device. They are the philosophical pivot. Frieza's hunt for immortality is the hunger in its purest form, not the desire for safety, but the attempt to cheat the truth that everything passes. Buddhism would call that tanha. Craving creates suffering because what is craved is impermanent. Wanting permanence is its own suffering. Frieza's life is an emblem of this paradox. He clings harder and is reborn into the same pattern. Named screen fields become a stage for the tragedy. He slaughters and then mutters for more. The scream, the burn, the victory, all dissolve into a restless next hour. Consider the massacre itself. Frieza kills with a certain theatricality, taunting Namekians, toying with hope before crushing it. That spectacle is not merely cruelty, it's distraction. Overwhelm the senses, drown the mirror, and perhaps the mirror will not show the missing thing. The violence is a theater of motion meant to anesthetize. It is a performative solution to an internal silence that cannot be filled by applause. And yet, there's a deeper irony. The very act of grasping power as cure is self-defeating. Power purchased through fear and annihilation produces loyalty only by fear, cheap and brittle. Empires built on terror are unstable because terror does not cultivate care. It cultivates resentment and cycles of revenge. The more Frieza tightens the screws, the more his reality pushes back. This is why domination becomes enslavement. Its ownership of the cosmos binds him to an endless ledger. Each conquest demands another conquest, merely to maintain the fiction of fullness. The death drive is insatiable because it is not feeding life. It is feeding the compulsion to repeat the act of filling. The act morphs into an addiction whose return on investment is always diminishing. The more you take, the less takenness comforts you. There's another face to this pattern: insecurity masquerading as omnipotence. This is Frieza's paranoia, the constant suspicion of betrayal, the obsession with new forms, the need for absolute loyalty, reveals the cheap foundation of his might. He is always worried someone will strip him of what he holds. That worry suggests dependency, not the dependency of a ruler on his subjects, but the dependency of a wounded self on external symbols of completion. So on Namek, between the dragon calling and the screams, we can watch a theory play out. Frieza's hunger is not appetite for empire. It is an attempt to fill a hole that cannot be filled from the outside. Freud would say he is enacting the death drive. Buddhism would say he is chained by tanha. Both would agree on the consequence. You cannot dominate your lack into meaning. In the end, domination eats the dominator. Frieza's life is a string of endings that read like beginnings. The grave on Namek should have been the conclusion of Emperor toppled, the galaxy exhaling. Instead, it becomes a pattern. He returns as metal and revenge, Mecha, Frieza. Years later, he is pulled from hiding, trained, and reborn again as Golden Frieza, that glinting avatar of renewed hunger. Each resurrection is a rerun of the same script, a corpse reanimated, a plan retooled, a hunger yet unchanged. Freud had a name for this kind of repetition. Repetition, compulsion. People replayed the scenes that wounded them, sometimes in hopes of mastery, often in the stubborn illusion that if they performed the drama differently this time, the pain will rearrange itself into meaning. Frieza's return is not evidence of learning, it is evidence of replay. He doesn't integrate the wound, he stages it. Each upgrade cyborg parts, new power, sleeker armor functions like a ritual mask. The thing beneath remains the same, a compulsive motion toward domination that never lands. Seen through a Buddhist lens, the pattern reads like Samsara incarnate. Buddhism teaches that clinging to Nabian's beings, to the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, the very engine of rebirth is craving, desire for an outcome, for permanence, for control. Frieza's rebirths dramatize this doctrine. He dies, he clings to power. Others answer that clinging by rebuilding him, and he returns to desire, the one thing he can never truly hold. The wheel spins, and he steps back into the same groove, as if the groove itself were destiny. Golden Frieza is the most ironic chapter. For a brief, gleaming moment, he appears transformed, trained, honed, perfected. Yet, what is new is surface deep, form without reformation. He has acquired technique in raw force, but not in sight. The gold is a cosmetic that amplifies his old compulsion rather than resolving it. The result is predictable, a burst of hubris followed by collapse. The training that birthed Golden Frieza is less a path to liberation then another rehearsal of the old drama, one with high production values. This is the key difference between rebirth and transformation. Rebirth repeats identity. Transformation alters the inner grammar of desire. Frieza experiences the former. To the viewers, it looks like escalation, more power, more spectacle. To the psychoanalytic gaze, it looks like a mind refusing to accept its edges. Instead of stopping and asking, "Why do I hunger?" he trains harder and then expects the hunger to be satisfied by spectacle. In Buddhism, the remedy would be relinquishment, not more accumulation, but the letting go that dissolves the very engine of coming back. There is also a social cost to his loop. Each resurrection requires others, loyal soldiers, fanatical lieutenants, technology who are willing to put him back into motion. But those same people are actors in his repetition. They become complicit in a wheel that grinds them as well. The empire built from fear cannot emancipate itself through fear. The army rebuilds the emperor. The emperor rebuilds the army. The choreography goes on. So, the image is a tragic one. Frieza reborn, not as a man who has learned how to stop, but as a man who has learned to better stage his endless return. The moral is stark. Rebirth without release is just repetition in new clothing. The golden hue doesn't change the loop. It only makes the loop brighter and easier to mistake for progress. Samsara is the cycle of suffering born from clinging. Frieza is its living billboard. Till he relearns desire as something to be seen through rather than satisfied, the wheel will turn. He will fall, rise, and fall again, always spectacular, never free. If Frieza's rule looks invulnerable, it is only because it is elastic. The illusion of absolute control stretches to hide the tear in the fabric of his self. He builds fortresses, installs surveillance, demands sworn fealty, yet paranoia is his most faithful counselor. Power is, in his hands, both a tool and a talisman against an inner emptiness he cannot name. He constructs control to anesthetize the ache. That attempt controls where his suffering truly lives. Freud would point to the mask in this move. Its control is often a defense, a way to keep the unconscious from spilling into public life. When a person insists on dominating external reality, it's sometimes because the inner world is anarchy. Frieza's empire is a loud, mechanical answer to quiet terror. The more absolute his demands, the louder the denial. The more he controls, the less secure he feels. His control is an ever-expanding scaffold that trembles in the face of any honest inspection. Buddhism sees the same dynamic through the doctrine of clinging. Tempting to fix the world so it never changes is to fight the nature of reality. The more one grasps to hold people, outcomes, reputations, the more one tightens the knot that ties suffering to the self. Ironically, the very measures Frieza takes to secure his peace create the conditions for its dissolution. Instability breeds resentment. Resentment produces plots. Plots invite ruin. The fortress becomes the trap. Perhaps the clearest demonstration of Frieza's limits comes in the tournament of power. Here is a man whose whole being believes in hierarchy, in an order where he sits near the top and everyone else obeys. Yet, the tournament demands flexibility, temporary alliances, improvisation, and trust born from necessity rather than fear. Frieza's instinct is not cooperation. It is calculation and dominance. Still, the architecture of the tournament forces him into partnership, most notably with Goku, the very person whose existence undermines Frieza's narrative of control. Working with Goku reveals a fracture. Control collapses into compromise. To survive, Frieza must adopt practices he despises. He must negotiate. Hate. He must allow possibility to exist outside of his strict commands. In that environment, his usual tactics, intimidation, top-down orders, preemptive annihilation backfire. The universe he likes to tidy and own cannot be tidied. It is a web of lives that require give and take. For the first time, his options include letting go not as a tactical retreat, but as a necessary existential shift. But Frieza rarely lets go. Even when cooperation produces outcomes he did not plan, he interprets them through the lens of control. What did I gain? Where is the leverage? The act of working beside Goku becomes a mirror. He sees a man who trusts life's circulation, fight, rest, fight again without chaining it. Goku's ease with uncertainty is an affront to Frieza's contract with the world. It is a different kind of power. Trust as a social force, rather than force as a social tool. The tragedy is that Frieza's suffering is not born of lack of capability. He can command, strategize, and transform. His terror is existential. He cannot bear the thought that something essential about him might not be salvageable through acquisition. Key Sid. Each time he tries to secure his being with more territory, more forms, more rituals, he only expands the map of what could be taken. Control becomes a mirror reflecting all that might yet be lost. Instead of freedom, he becomes the most comprehensive prisoner of his possessions. This is why his collapse often looks self-inflicted. Scenes of his downfall are not simply due to physical defeat. They are the punctuation marks of a life that mistook control for cure. When the heart of control is finally pried open, whether by better fighters or by stubborn friendship, Frieza's structure is shown for what it is: scaffolding propped against a void. Philosophically, the beat is sharp. Control is a strategy to avoid being seen. It hides insecurity by converting relationships into transactions. It forbids vulnerability because vulnerability might reveal the very emptiness control seeks to obscure. The solution, both psychoanalytic and Buddhist, points away from tactics and toward transformation. Stop trying to own the moment. Stop trying to freeze the flow. Loosen the grip until you can meet the present with both hands open. Frieza refuses that instruction. He prefers the machinery of certainty. The irony is complete. In the world, he has most succeeded at crafting one of obedience, terror, and hierarchy is the most unfree. His empire is not liberation. T is a gilded cage of his own making. And the more he tightens it, the less he notices the bars. Frieza never learns the one lesson power appears to promise, that the outside can fix the inside. Even when he sits again on a throne, gilded and triumphant, his smile reads like a legal fiction, convincing in court, hollow at home. Victory produces a momentary lift, then a return to the same ache. He wins, he schemes, he loses, he rebuilds. Rinse, repeat. That loop is his eternity. From a Freudian angle, this is a textbook prison of compulsion. Freud noticed that some drives don't aim at pleasure so much as at repetition. The death drive, thanatos, is the shadow impulse that nudges organisms toward repetition, destruction, and the reenactment of trauma. Frieza's resurrections and revenge plots are not strange anomalies. They are the enactment of a psyche caught in repetition compulsion. Each conquest is less a closure than a ritual replay. Perform the act, hope the act alters the inner scene. Failed to be altered, perform the act again. The behavior promises redemption, but delivers repetition. Power becomes the behavior that reproduces the very wound it was meant to cure. Buddhism names the same structure with different language. Kana, craving, binds beings to Samsara, the cycle of rebirth and suffering. Frieza's literal returns to life dramatize this doctrine. He dies, clings, is returned, and immediately resumes the chase. The fundamental error is not that he wants power, it's that he believes possession will stop wanting. Attachment to outcomes hardens into identity. The more he clings, the less free he is to see what the craving covers. Look at the end of Super. Frieza resurrected and restored, smiling like an emperor who has finally collected all the coins in a jar. Yet, there's no rest in that smile. Instead, there is calculation. The plot of revenge is never fully buried. He sits on his chair and counts possibilities, not because the universe lacks resources, but because he lacks an answer for the hole inside him. The restored emperor is timeless, not because he transcended suffering, but because he is endlessly re-enlisted into it. He is a relic preserved in amber, movement without transformation. This is the cruelty of craving. It makes you eternal only by making you repeatable. Others may rise and fall around him, reform alliances, discover compassion, or die with a last softened hand. Frieza replicates himself, becomes a fossilized habit of wanting. The social cost is severe. Empires formed from terror fragment into plots and counterplots. Loyalty is purchased with fear, not forged in shared meaning. Those who enable him, scientists, lieutenants, unscrupulous allies, are Kothors of the loop, and they, too, become trapped in the gears they feed. There is a paradox here worth emphasizing. Control is the very thing that produces insecurity. The more Frieza tries to make his world predictable, the more unpredictable it becomes, because control requires maintenance, surveillance, escalation. Each escalatory move multiplies the responsibilities on which his sense of fullness depends. A ruler who must constantly secure his reign is never sovereign. He is hostage to the ongoing performance of sovereignty. Freud would say his mastery is a defense against inner chaos. Buddhism would say his attachment is what chains him. Both descriptions converge on a single moral. You cannot dominate your way into freedom. So we watch him smile and plot, resurrect and rage, and we see a life staged as continuity but experienced as monotony of want. He is timeless, not because he has solved anything, but because he refuses the only lesson that might free him to stop equating possession with being. His immortality is the theater of the same scene, with new costumes and brighter lights. If the rest of the universe is trying to move forward, Frieza is staying backstage and rehearsing the same act until every set is worn smooth. Frieza is not tragic because he's powerful. He is tragic because his power becomes the method of his own entrapment. He mistakes the circle for the cure. And so, the wheel keeps turning. Why does victory taste like ash? Why does the summit feel suddenly like a ledge? Story gives us an anatomy of that emptiness. Freud's lesson is blunt. Repeating destructive acts can be a way the mind responds to wounds it cannot put into words. Power without integration feeds the death drive rather than healing it. If domination becomes a strategy to avoid inner emptiness, every victory will be a performance meant to distract from the fact that the wound remains unintegrated. You clutch more, but the center that the clutch seeks to shore up never arrives. The behavior continues because the psyche continues to ask the same question. Will this make me whole? The answer, in Frieza's case, is always no. Buddhism offers the remedy. Freud diagnoses release. Nirvana is not annihilation. It is the unbinding that comes when craving is seen for what it is and allowed to fall away. The cycle of samsara turns as long as we hold on. It loosens when we relinquish. Frieza never tries relinquishment. He doubles down. He builds, he upgrades, he returns. The wheel inevitably turns. Desire reproduces its own suffering until desire is no longer the governor of being. What does that mean for us? Watching someone who is both caricature and mirror. It means asking where we mistake accumulation for repair. Where are we chasing control to paper over a private fear? Where do our achievements become a hedge against the very vulnerability achievements cannot touch? The danger is not power itself. The danger is making power the measure of your completeness. Frieza's curse is simple and terrible. He has everything: armies, planets, forms, resurrections, except one thing he will never grasp: enough. That is the cruel paradox of attachment. The more you take to feel full, the more you discover you have been filling the wrong vessel. If this landed for you, tell us, which Frieza moment did you find most revealing his golden hubris? His returns or the quiet way he smiles while plotting? And who should we unpack next to psychology? Do you want threads of self to read like a mirror? Drop your suggestion below. We read every comment. Power is seductive because it promises certainty. Frieza's life warns us what happens when certainty becomes a substitute for presence. Release the grab. Learn to sit with the lack, okay? That is the only path out of a gilded cage.